Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and kick things off here. We don't quite have a quorum just yet, but when we do, we'll come back and do fun stuff like the minutes. But good afternoon, good morning. Already thinking afternoon. Good morning and welcome. It's great to have you all here. You can bust out. It looks like we're getting tight on some of the chairs. We may have to bust out a few more if people continue. But it's great to see so many people coming out today. All right, so what I'd like to do to just start off, and I think, are we okay on the AV stuff in the back? We're good? All right, thanks. I wanted to thank Marissa Weinberg, who helps with coordinating this and does a lot of the work behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Marissa, and also helping us with AV. We have Seth, Jen, and Paul are all helping with AV. Thank you so much for your help with that. Let's do some introductions. We normally do kind of lightning round introductions. We'll start with the members of the council sort of sitting around the table, and then some of the people sitting around the table are liaisons. We'll talk a little bit about that here in just a bit, and then we'll also do the audience, sort of just lightning round, so everybody knows who everybody is. So Randy, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, so Randy Elliott, Davis County Commissioner.
Elizabeth Kitchens, the Nature Conservancy.
Marissa Weinberg, Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Waylon Myers with the water sewer folks, the real sewer folks.
Trevor Nelson with Bear River Canal Company, the Utah Task Force, and then I'm the liaison from the Bear River Watershed Council.
I'm Tyler Smith. I'm with the Utah Department of Veterans and Military Affairs, and right now I'm functioning as the interim coordinator for the Great Salt Lake Sentinel Landscape until we find a real.
Great. I'm Jeff Richards. I represent the migratory bird production areas.
Thanks, Jeff. And if we could go over here, we'll start with you.
R. Jeffrey Hicks, Utah Airport Association.
Max Malmquist, National Audubon Society.
Shayla Adams, National Audubon Society.
Heidi Hoven, National Audubon Society, but also Gilmore Sanctuary.
John Urey with Water for the West.
Adam Wickline, National Audubon Society and Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
Lily Wetterlin, SWCA Environmental Consultants.
Ari Mason, SWCA.
Jan Streifel, League of Women Voters.
Lynn DeFreitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Dave Livermore, volunteer for the Nature Conservancy.
Madison Weber, Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office.
Marcel Shoup, National Audubon Society and Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust.
Brad Perry, the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation.
Craig Miller, Utah Division of Water Resources.
Laura Vernon, Water Resources.
Anna Ville with the Nature Conservancy.
Kelly Kopp with Utah State University.
Joanna Endter-Wada, Utah State University.
Dwight Slaw, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
Ryan Rowland, USGS Utah Water Science Center.
David O'Leary, USGS Utah Water Science Center.
Jeff Denblaker, Jacobs.
Dan Strouk, Utah Audubon Council.
Mark Reynolds, U.S. Magnesium.
Randy Zollinger, Corollo Engineers.
Ben Steierman, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Mike Begley, Utah AG's office.
Jamie Barnes, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Johnny Vasick, Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment.
Tara Piketty, Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment.
Glen Merrill, National Weather Service.
Tim Davis, Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office.
Seth Majors, DNR.
Jennifer Biggs, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands.
Thanks, everybody. I was reflecting when I first started coming to Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meetings. It was about 8 years ago, and we used to fit rather comfortably in the small conference room in the county building here in Farmington. So no longer, and that's a reflection of just how the profile of the lake has gone up. But it's great to have everybody here. I know there's a bunch of people online, and it's kind of a train wreck to try to have everybody online introduce themselves. So I hope you'll excuse me, folks online, if we don't introduce you individually. There's a few of you that we will have do some introductions here in a minute. We do now have a quorum, so I will formally call the meeting to order. And we have an agenda that was circulated to members of the council. You've hopefully had a chance to review that. Any changes to the agenda? Okay, Leland moves to approve the agenda as circulated. Can I get a second?
I'll second that. This is Tom Ward,
Okay,
representing
second
municipalities.
from Tom, thank you so much. All in favor say of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carries unanimously. The agenda is adopted. We also have minutes dated March 13th, 2024, our last meeting. Those were circulated as well. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review them. I'm sure just with scintillating detail. Can I get a motion to any changes to the minutes, or in lieu of that, a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, Jeff Richards moves to approve. Second from Leland. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Minutes are approved. Okay, so just in terms of, let's see, Elizabeth, I want to take just a minute. I did not give you the warning on this, but could you just a few minutes kind of introduce yourself? You were formally confirmed to replace Dave on the council, so we'd love to hear just a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. No worries about not letting me know. That's okay. I'm getting used to this a little bit. Stepping in for Dave Livermore as Utah State Director for the Nature Conservancy. And I'm very honored and privileged to be here today amongst this illustrious group that I have watched from close and afar for a considerable time. I've been with the Nature Conservancy for 22 years. Started out in the legal department, so I'm a lawyer by training. And then Dave hired me as Conservation Director for the Utah chapter. And that's when I first became intimately familiar with this group and with the work that they do for the Great Salt Lake, and really learned more than I ever thought I could about Great Salt Lake and its situation. And so I am now stepping into the role of Utah State Director. Very honored to do that and be a part of this group and move forward with a very ambitious agenda and under new leadership of Tim Hawks. And that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Welcome aboard. I'll note that we do have one other person kind of in the confirmation process as well. So for our next meeting, we should have a new member as well. So we'll keep you updated on that. I wanted to take sort of chair's prerogative. I asked Dave Livermore to show up to today's council meeting, and I think Dave was probably looking forward to, after long and faithful service on the council, was looking forward to not having to show up to a Great Salt Lake Advisory Council meeting. And here I asked him to show up, and I wanted just to take a few minutes to talk about Dave and have just a token of appreciation for him. But Dave Livermore, many of you know him, based on his reputation, well-deserved reputation, really a champion of conservation here in the state of Utah, was head of the Nature Conservancy for many, many years and spearheaded a lot of critical initiatives in Utah and across the West. Very grateful for that. And then he's been very instrumental in this organization. Dave was one of the original conspirators, dare we say, that really was behind getting this organization started. And Dave served for 14 years, right, Dave, as a member of the council, and just deeply grateful to him for his long and dedicated service. On a personal note, I was fortunate to sit in on some of the TNC commemorations. I don't know what you call it, Dave, the send-off, the roasts for Dave in his messy desk, which is sort of famous in TNC circles. But you know, one of the things that really struck me as I sat in on that was they talked so much about how Dave mentored a lot of people who have gone on to play key roles in conservation. On a personal level, it's interesting because about 8 years ago, I found myself looking for work, and I was sitting in the legislature at the time, And Dave's the one that introduced me to Don Leonard and got me working, and the brine shrimp industry hired me, and I've been working on Great Salt Lake issues ever since. So Dave, you deserve the credit and maybe some of the blame for getting me involved on Great Salt Lake issues. So on a personal level, I just want to say thank you for that. It's really great, rewarding work. Okay, I have something for you, so we'll stand up and do it, and I don't know.
And not really deserving these accolades because there's so many others in the room that have done more for this entity than I have and the lake. So salute to all of you. And last meeting in March, of course, we saluted Don for his leadership. And of course, Leland's been here from the beginning. And Tim, we're so pleased that you're in charge. Just a couple of historical notes. The last meeting I passed around this little article, which I can pass around again, which is the first Great Salt Lake Advisory Council in 2008. This is before SB 343 passed in 2010, and that created the current council. But since we're talking about credit, I wanted to mention how the seed was planted for at least an organization as well as others in the room here. And that is that as we were building protected areas on the lake up to about 10,000 acres now, we noticed that there were so many agencies and organizations involved, like over 40 different entities that had some say in the lake. And we noticed in other states and other water bodies like the Puget Sound Trust or the Chesapeake Bay actually is a coordinating council, or the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency in California and Nevada. These were convening groups to bring stakeholders together. And Amanda Smith, who deserves credit, then Amanda Iyer was our government relations director, drafted by John Huntsman, who happened to be a member of the Nature Conservancy before he was governor. And so I really give Amanda credit for planting the seed with Governor Huntsman, who appointed the council, and the rest is history. As Tim said very well, the council has grown in impact and scope, and it's just amazing what has transpired. So thank you for these acknowledgments, but really they're not entirely undeserved, but mostly all of you get the credit. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Dave. And it's kind of an interesting note because it segues into really the next agenda item. Dave talked about the genesis behind Great Salt Lake Advisory Council was a forum to bring stakeholders together because there's all this disparate people talking about Great Salt Lake, and let's find a forum to put it together. And ever since GSLAC, or Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, was formed, it is served as kind of that forum. So if you're interested in Great Salt Lake, you can show up and participate in these meetings, and they're structured in such a way they're fairly open, right? So there's formal members of the board, but other people come and participate. As we can see today, we've got a lot of people here to talk. So I want to talk about liaisons, which is really just an exercise to see how well we can spell French words. I struggle with liaisons. This is a word that I picked, but let me give you just a little bit of context. So a few years ago, and we have Warren Peterson with us on the line, and Warren, as many of you know, has been very instrumental in the water community over many, many years. You want to talk about, Dave, we were talking about like code, Utah code, and you talk about fingerprints. Warren's fingerprints are on more than a little of the Utah code. And I've had the real honor and privilege of working with Warren on water issues for now almost 20 years. It's hard to believe. But a few years ago, we collaborated, when I was in the legislature, we collaborated on a bill that set up watershed councils and really established a framework for people who are interested in water to engage on sort of a local level. And as part of that framework, there was this idea, well, the Great Salt Lake is kind of unique, and so it makes sense that the watersheds that feed into Great Salt Lake, we should have a Great Salt Lake Watershed Council. And so the Division of Water Resources and others have been working to set up these watershed councils consistent with the statute to help vet water issues at the local level and feed them up to a state watershed council. And they've now created a lot of these local watershed councils. And then it sort of occurred to me that there was a little bit of an oversight there, because the statute created a Great Salt Lake Watershed Council, and guess what? We already had one in place. It's called the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. By any definition of watershed councils, the Great Salt Lake Advisory Councils have functioned as a watershed council for many, many years. And one of the key expectations for the Watershed Council Act was first, do no harm. So it was meant to be additive and to supplement efforts that were going on and not disruptive. It wasn't supposed to disrupt watershed councils that were already working. And so we have this sort of fundamental tension, right, between statutory mandates set up GSLAC in the first instance, and then this Great Salt Lake Watershed Council. So there's been some efforts to try to meld the two. Actually, there was some draft language that was in this last session that would have formally just designated GSLAC as the council. There was some debate about that and the membership. And so what we settled on as kind of an interim way is I didn't want to just sit there and potentially disrupt the good work that GSLAC's doing with debates about membership and who gets a say. And those of you that sat on GSLAC for a long time know we don't. We take a lot of really critical votes and highly debate. We don't. But, you know, it didn't want debates about membership and representation to really sort of get in the way or disrupt anything positive that's going on. And so as kind of an interim, we've settled in on this idea of liaisons. And I looked up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary to see what is a liaison. It is, quote, a person who establishes and maintains communications for mutual understanding and cooperation. That's a great idea. So liaisons, as I see it, are representatives from another group or interest or local watershed council who establish and maintain communications with this group, with the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, to promote mutual understanding and cooperation. So I think it's really in keeping with kind of the whole spirit of what we've been trying to do. That's why we've asked several liaisons to come today. I'm grateful for those folks either that have accepted an invitation to be a liaison to the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, or just naturally in a position to do that because they're part of a local watershed council already. And Brad Perry, could I get you maybe to come up and sit at the table here, because we kind of had the council members and the liaisons sit up here. Appreciate you doing that. But what I'd like to do is to give these liaisons just a brief opportunity to talk about themselves and the interests that they represent. And I think you'll see from the folks that are here and that we've asked to be here how we're really trying to make sure that interests are represented here and have the opportunity. So Warren, maybe if I could go to you first of all. We have Warren Peterson is online. I've been taking your name in vain, Warren. So I wonder if you could just introduce yourself and then talk about the interest that you represent, how it relates to Great Salt Lake.
Well, thank you, Tim. I'll not even bother to respond to some of the information or disinformation you've already given. But Tim asked that I serve as the liaison for agricultural interests. Currently, I'm retired, as trained as an attorney, worked as an attorney, and also as a manager for an international farm and ranch investment and food production company for a number of years. And currently, in a professional capacity, I work as a policy advisor for Utah Farm Bureau. So that's the hat I'd like to wear in this setting, is the policy advisor for Utah Farm Bureau, but also with a strong background in agriculture and agricultural water interests and, frankly, water management. Tim, I think you and I both share a lot of fingerprints on a lot of statutes, but the last time anyone counted, and that was Mike Styler, and that was 5 years ago, he figured that we had worked on somewhere close to 120 water bills. So some background there. but I'm vitally interested in Great Salt Lake. It's I refer to it oftentimes as the really big canary in the coal mine, because if Great Salt Lake is not doing well, then probably we're not doing well as a state and as a people, because it's a good indicator of how well we're managing our water resources. So I'm very interested in and excited to be part of the discussions here, and maybe I'll speak on behalf of myself and others who are just joining in. Be patient with us while we get up to speed. And thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Warren. It's great to have you engaged. Really appreciate your involvement. Tyler, could we maybe go to you next? We'll just sort of come around the horn here.
You bet. Very happy to be here, even though I had to stop and make sure I had the right address when I was driving out here. Beautiful place. So I spent 35 years in the Army, retired about just over 2 years ago. And I am what is considered to be sort of an accidental participant in this industry or in this enterprise. In 2011, I was assigned to be the commander of Camp Williams, and it was quickly evident to me the problems with incompatibility between surrounding communities and military operations. And in many cases, military training would have to be constrained or restricted or even forbidden because of certain circumstances pertaining to urban development, encroachment, other things, wildlife habitat, things like that. So it was very soon that I became very involved in engaging with the Department of Defense and participating in programs to get funding for conservation easements around the installation, partnering with the Conservation Fund and other organizations, NRCS, and have accomplished some great things. And I became the national chairman of the Training Center Advisory Council. And so I would have the opportunity to go around the nation and visit National Guard training centers. And everyone had unique issues with resiliency. Installation resiliency became the real buzzword. And so the Department of Defense, the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Interior in 2013 signed a letter of agreement establishing the Sentinel Landscape Program. So the state of Utah passed a resolution in 2023 to pursue a Sentinel Landscape in the state of Utah. So the Department of Veterans and Military Affairs was the organization, the department that was assigned to pursue that. So they reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to come on board and pursue that. So many people in this room, Tim Davis, Annville, Jamie Barnes, I don't want to leave anybody out, was very contributory in the proposal process. It took about a year, and I had to really, like herding cats, get all these different people together, educate them on the concept, and so we were very fortunate to get the designation. It was very competitive. There were some organizations that were on their second, even third attempt, and it's a 2-year cycle process. So we were very fortunate, and I believe that there's 2 reasons why we were successful. One is because the Great Salt Lake is recognized nationally of being a huge concern to ensure the ecosystem is preserved and resilient. And the other one is because Utah, as evidenced by this meeting here, is known for tremendous collaboration. Some of the members of the partners of the Sentinel Landscape are already used to working together. So essentially what the Sentinel Landscape will do is it will really formalize a structure that really drills down to efficient and effective coordination. And the other thing it will do is when it comes time for the distribution of funds through the Department of Defense and other programs, Sentinel Landscapes typically or often get priority funding because there's already an established structure of collaboration. And so the program managers that manage those funds know, hey, if there's a project in the Sentinel Landscape, we know it's going to be managed well, and there's going to be a cross-leveling of resources and intersecting interests and things like that to get things accomplished. So anyways, that's my role, to kind of serve as the military part, because honestly, military resiliency, installation resiliency goes way beyond just outside the fence line. It's everything. This is a corridor from Hill Air Force Base to the Utah Test and Training Range. Huge strategic value to the nation. And so we want to make sure that the wildlife habitat, the water resources, all that is protected and managed well. So thanks.
Thanks, Tyler. Great to have you here. Trevor?
So my name is Trevor Nelson. My day job is I'm supposed to manage the Bear River Canal Company. But I've been in the water space for about a decade, and I've been the general manager of Bear River Canal for about 6 years. In that time, I was also asked to participate in the Utah Water Task Force to help with legislation that's been needed concerning not just water use in general in Utah, but also concerning the lake, giving some of that agricultural feedback and background. Kind of what my employer is known for is that we are one of the larger irrigation companies in the state, and we also, our service area is the northeast arm of the Great Salt Lake. So we have quite a few of those wetland areas that are actually shareholders in our system. So we're very vested in seeing the success of the lake itself and the wetland areas that surround it. We have been implementing some pretty aggressive improvements, both through automation and pipelines and other mediums in our system to manage our water smarter. Agriculture is part of the solution concerning the lake, and one of the things we focused on is being able to do more with less. We rely on the prior appropriation system and don't want to see that it's changed or goes off in a different direction, but we understand the need for us to be able to do more with less so that these ecosystems downstream can thrive and survive. My tie to this group, though, is that I was designated by the Bear River Watershed Council as the representative to the Great Salt Lake Watershed Council, and was invited to be the liaison to this group. And so appreciate the invitation. I've attended this group I try to make it in person, but if not online for almost the entire time I've been at Bear River Canal, and really look forward to giving some additional input as a liaison. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Trevor. It's great to have you with us. Brad, can we go over to you? You got to, push that button.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Brad Perry. I am currently serve as the vice chairperson for the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation. I also am employed there as the natural resources officer. I spent nearly 20 years with the Bureau of Reclamation out of the regional office in Salt Lake City. Over half of that time I spent as the program coordinator for the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Program. So working in the 7 basin states and working on the Colorado River system. So I have a pretty good idea of how those sorts of things work. I'm here representing the Northwestern Band. I believe I was asked to represent, the tribe, because the entire watershed from basically Point of the Mountain north is the Northwestern Band Aboriginal territory. And so our trust land is in basically Portage, Utah, a little, Washakie, not related to Washakie Renewable Energy. I just have to make that distinction. We have water there. We have a little cemetery and some water rights. The other thing that we have land in Preston, Idaho, that's about 12 miles north of the Utah border, but our land is right on the Bear River main stem, and we're doing I'm in charge of producing a large ecological restoration project on 500 acres, and so really the tribe is just interested because this is homeland. We subsisted on the Bear River.
Farmington, we've lost audio. Could you please check your system?
Oh, we'll try another one. It's my voice. Really, we're just trying to be a resource and be a help, however we can, to provide any historical information, any letters of support, and just be part of the solution. We're part of the community because we're not a reservation tribe. So this is something that we feel like we would like to be involved with, and as more of a contributor of how do we help this group. And so pleased to be here, and thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. It's great to have you with it. Thanks for suffering through the three mic exchange. Appreciate it. It's great to have you here. Okay. Other liaisons that are here in person that I missed by any chance? I didn't see any more. Oh, Heidi, come sit up here. Introduce yourself. Maybe you don't want to avoid that mic. You might have sit on this side. I don't know. Yeah. So Heidi, if you could just give us a little intro just like that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, we'll try this side. And let me know if you cannot hear me. So good morning, everybody. I'm Heidi Hoven, and I'm with National Audubon Society. I'm the senior manager of nearly 4,000 acres out on the south shore of Great Salt Lake, which is called Gilmore Sanctuary. And you may hear it also as the South Shore Preserve, which is a partnership with the Mitigation Commission, soon to turn over those lands and water rights to Audubon. I am also serving on the governing board for the Jordan River Commission. And since this development of the Watershed, Great Salt Lake Watershed Council, I have been selected as the representative of the Jordan River Commission to serve as that liaison to this group. So thank you very much for that opportunity.
Thank you, Heidi, and welcome. It's great to have you with us. Online, do we have any other liaisons online? I know Ben Abbott had a last-minute emergency, couldn't make it. Anybody else? McKinley? Look, who's that?
Yeah, I've been selected as the interim Weber Watershed Council liaison, and yeah, that's who I am. I'm a rancher from Summit County. I'm also a professional educator with the Savory Institute, and also the chair of the Utah Department of Ag and Food Soil Health Advisory Committee for the state, Utah.
Awesome. Thanks for introducing yourself. It's great to have you aboard. The other two on my list, Ben Abbott, representing the Utah Lake Watershed Council. Ben, any chance you join? Don't think he could make it. And then Jacob Clegg, representing the West Desert Watershed Council with Ensign Engineering. Jacob, you're here.
Yep, I'm on the call, Tim. Thanks. I'm a engineer for Ensign Engineering. I'm the consulting engineer for Tooele County. The West Desert Watershed Council was recently formed. I was appointed to attend the meeting as the liaison. I'm happy to be here and to learn and be part of the group.
Great to have you aboard, Jacob. Thanks so much. Okay, so that's the introductions for the liaisons, and we look forward to just figuring out how to bring voices together effectively about Great Salt Lake, which is what we're all concerned about. So thanks everybody, and thanks to members, liaisons for spending the time to introduce yourselves a little bit to this group. We recognize Dina. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here. And now we're going to turn the time over to Tim Davis, the other Tim, who's the Deputy Commissioner for the Great Salt Lake, and he's going to give us a little bit of update on the Commissioner's Office. And this is something we plan to do regularly as part of these meetings, is have a little update from the Commissioner's Office. So we'll turn it over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I was going to sit, but I was afraid of that mic over there, Brad. So Commissioner Steed and I both are excited to see everybody here. We're both exceptionally excited to see the Watershed councils represented as well. We think this is a great evolution of the advisory council with the watershed councils coming in and creating a single voice for kind of representing the diversity around the lake and the interests around the lake. So Tim, it was a great idea. Mr. Chair, great idea. And thanks for setting it up. And we look forward to discussions with the advisory council going forward. I was going to, those of you who have seen me give talks, once I get a joke in my head, I can't get it out of my head. So I'm going to, Brian and I both were in DC the last couple days, and I will say I'm doing my part of bringing some water back from DC. It was so muggy and so hot that I'm pretty sure I'll wring out my clothes and bring a couple of gallons of water back from the east for the lake. And so in DC, we really spent time talking to the delegation and their staff about the work that's going on for the lake, talking about steps that federal agencies, our partners, USGS, Bureau of Reclamation, especially who are here today, but others are doing and working with us related to the lake, as well as the need for additional resources for the lake. That while the state has made significant appropriations for conservation and for the lake, Commissioner's Office, the Trust, and others, we're going to need additional resources as we go forward to work with farmers, districts, communities, businesses to make sure that we can take steps that benefit them and benefit the lake at the same time. So there were really good discussions. It was too darn muggy, but we'll continue to go back and talk about on a regular basis. We plan to go back to DC and talk with the delegation staff as well as our federal partners on a regular basis. The other thing that the Commissioner's Office is doing is, as of today, we'll be releasing a year one report. The Commissioner's Office was born in 2013 legislative session, set it up. It actually was born on July 1st, 2023, when Brian took over as the first commissioner. And so we're coming out with a year one report today, and we'll be sending out a press release as well. And what that really documents is all of the great work, whether it's the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, the Division of Water Resources, Division of Water Rights, the Advisory Council, others are doing, both at state, local, federal, and private partners are doing for the lake. And those efforts really represent the first year of the Great Salt Lake Strategic Plan that the Commissioner's Office put together. We telegraphed that the first year, the short term of the strategic plan, would be about continuing on and building upon work that had already begun. And the strategic plan itself really stood on the shoulders of the Advisory Council and the work of the other agencies and stakeholders and groups had done previously. So that will be coming out. And like I said, and one of the key roles of the Commissioner's Office is to quarterback and coordinate the work across all the groups working on the lake, not to do it ourselves. So we're really trying to capture all the work, including new legislation appropriations, into that year one report. So that's coming out. Additionally, a couple months ago, we held a dust forum, Great Salt Lake Dust Forum, really to bring researchers, managers together for a day to identify what we know and what we don't know about Great Salt Lake dust, and try to set priorities going forward for the future. So we will be releasing those priorities for Great Salt Lake dust research and management in the next couple weeks. We want to make sure that we're kind of staging these out. And then both Brian and I are spending a tremendous and have spent a tremendous amount of time in my short 8 months and his long year, traveling around the state and really listening to people, listening to different groups, talking about why the lake's important, talking about the strategic plan. And we're going to continue to do that. We held, and it was Chair Hawks's initiation, we held the first of a listening session, a roadshow in Box Elder County a couple weeks ago. There was a good conversation that came out of that, largely with the agricultural community. And then we'll be holding another listening session roadshow on July 23rd. We're looking at the Salt Lake City downtown library right now. And these are really opportunities for people to come together, share their hopes, concerns, and solutions that they'd like us to consider as the advisory council and the commissioner's office move forward with taking concrete steps for the lake. So I will stop there, Mr. Chair, and see if there's any questions for me at this point from the council.
Yeah, so any questions from either liaisons or member of the council or commissioner's office? About any from the public? Anybody with a burning question?
And I think Brian is on virtually. So if Brian wants to add anything virtually, I'd welcome to do that too.
Brian, any record correcting needed after Tim's presentation?
No, I think Tim did a great job stating the various activities we have going on. It's been a pleasure to work on these issues for the last year. It has been work, and I truly appreciate all the partnerships that we have formed and have been able to really continue with the great people in that room. So thanks so much, and look forward to continuing good work. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. And I want to thank Brian and Tim. I don't think it's fully appreciated just what a challenge this job is that they're trying to do. It's a really difficult challenge. They take a lot of slings and arrows in the course of doing it, but they've both really been doing phenomenal work trying to do this and do it collaboratively and do it thoughtfully. So I really appreciate all your good work. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Oh, Elizabeth, with a quick
Ask
question.
Tim, what do you hope to get? What takeaway messages do you hope to get from the road shows and listening sessions? Are you going to be able to share those takeaways?
Sure. Yeah, we will be happy to share those, bring those back, what we hear. And like I said, the road shows are just one part of. I'm traveling around, and the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food are doing a great job of setting up meetings where I can go out and sit down with conservation districts across the basin as well to just hear what the supervisors think. But I'd be happy to come back to the advisory council and liaisons and just share generally what we heard. And so, yeah, if we're thinking we're doing these first two kind of at the polar opposites of the lake, and then I think we'll set up others, but happy to come back and report not just from those, but just from the other, what we've heard about ideas. How do we get more water to the lake, but do it in a way that is balanced with the other water uses in the lake? It's really, that's the key message. And the other key message that I think both through all this work over the last year is it's going to take all of us working together, and it's going to take time. We have a lot of things in motion, and that's really what the year one report also spells out, but it's going to take time. There's not a silver bullet and I've heard the chair say silver buckshot a lot too, but it's going to be some of that buckshot's moving faster than others. So it's going to be, I don't know what analogy to use for that, but I'll just stop there. But yeah, happy to come back.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Warren, Warren's got a question.
Tim, tell us how we get access to the first year report.
Warren, it'll be released on the commissioner's office website. So Great Salt Lake .utah.gov. And if you can't see it there, I believe you have my email, Warren, too. So you can also ask me for it. So, but yeah, we're planning to release it today. It's dated. It takes a while to edit things between Brian and me. So it's dated July 1st because that's really when we finished it, and then just kind of edited it since then. So also Madison Weber in our office can also provide it to people if people can't find it on the website.
Thank
you.
Tim.
Yeah, don't look for it right now. It's not there yet, Warren. It will be.
Okay. I just looked and it wasn't, so I asked. Thank you.
Waiting with bated breath.
Exactly.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Tim. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is Glen Merrill from the National Weather Service here to kind of give us an update on how things are looking. Glen, you've presented before to this group. It's great to have you back. Thanks for being here. And Glenn, when you're up and ready, we'll ask you to speak right into that mic. You got to get pretty close on these mics.
So my name is Glen Merrill. I'm a hydrologist with the National Weather Service Weather Forecast Office based right here in Salt Lake City. So hydrologist, there's a large span of what a hydrologist does. And in my case, I'm a service hydrologist and I wear a lot of hats. And basically my focus in my position is the impacts of weather on essentially snow and water in the state of Utah. So that spans from water supply, snowmelt runoff, flooding associated with that. It also translates into flash flooding, especially in our slot canyons down south and debris flows. I'll pass that. I just wanted to kind of introduce why what I do in my job. So if it's the impacts of weather on snow and water, and we're here to talk about the Great Salt Lake, I was asked to do an overview of the water year 2024 from October up through the present, how the weather impacted our snowpack, which is extremely important for our water supply and not just past but future of the Great Salt Lake. The water supply, 90 to 95% of our water supply in the state of Utah comes from snowmelt runoff and capturing it and using it downstream from there. Weather plays the biggest role in that accumulation of the snowpack throughout the winter season, and then the efficiency of that snowmelt runoff during the spring and early summer period. So going back to the beginning of the water year, starting in October and coming up through the end of June, we're looking at weather just surmised in average temperatures over that time, image on the left, and the precipitation that we received over that time, image on the right. If we look at temperatures on the left and take the mean temperatures over that whole period from October up through the end of June, those warm colors indicate above normal temperatures. Now, this is something that we have become quite used to. This is something that will in all parts continue in the future. It'll just be variable over time. But if we look at the state of Utah, focused there in the center, from October through the end of June, many areas across the state, especially the low elevations, were much above normal temperatures, which indicate in that range the top 10th percentile. So only 10 years over the last 100 years have been as warm as those darker orange areas. But important to this year is if we look at the spine of where the mountains are located in the state of Utah, temperatures were much closer to a normal status. And a lot of that had to do, you can see it in the white splatched around the Wasatch and portions of the Bear River Range and Central Plateau. You factor the precipitation in with those near, closer to normal temperatures. We did retain fairly low snow levels during most of our precipitation events over the winter time. And looking on that image on the right, especially focused over and around the Great Salt Lake and the mountains and tributaries that feed it, those green colors indicate above normal precipitation, top 33 percentile over the period of record dating back all the way to late 1800s. Now, the importance of this not only is for this year, but it couples with last year in our record-breaking winter snowpack season that we had in 2023. Does anyone in this room want to take a guess when the last time we had back-to-back above normal winter seasons in regards to snowpack and snow water equivalent? It was about 20 years ago, 2005, 2006. But again, that's 20 years, right? That's almost 2 decades. So it was really great to see not just the record-breaking snowpack that we had last year, but to follow it up with a subsequent above-average snowpack this year, which we'll look at in a moment. And precipitation-wise, a near or above normal precipitation period over the last 9 months. And where the precipitation was most abundant was over and around the Great Salt Lake. Great to see. So combining temperatures and precipitation and going back to water supply and the main tributaries for water getting to the Great Salt Lake, we're going to be looking at the Bear River, the Weber River, and the Utah Lake Provo, Sixth Creek Basin areas. And we're going to start with snowpack and how that translated this year. You can see the peak, the black line there in early April. That black line is the peak of the snowpack this year. You compare it to that green line below, which is the median accumulation for snowpack in snow water equivalent, which is the vertical axis over time, which is the horizontal axis. That black line is well above the green line. In fact, it's 123% of normal snow water equivalent at its peak in the Bear headwaters. And the NRCS is the one who accumulates this data and shares it with us all. And in this watershed, we're looking at all the individual snow-tell sites lumped together for that watershed area for the Bear River, and we sat at 123% median. Well, not all this water translates to runoff, right? We can have loss through sublimation, where the snow evaporates essentially into the air, loss to the soils, etc. This year was an extremely efficient runoff year, even more so than last year. And that was a thanks to last year and kind of re-energizing a lot of our soil moistures, etc. The weather also played a big part in allowing the efficiency of snowmelt to come off. So for this basin, I'm going to be focusing on water supply in thousands of acre feet, how much water we've seen move from our headwater areas in these three basins. So starting with the Bear, this is a very complicated graph to an image to describe. There's a ton of information here. It largely ties to water supply forecasts in time along the horizontal axis from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. In that total April through July volume of water that passes across a gauge, in this case, it's Utah-Wyoming state line on the upper headwaters of the Bear River. It's a forecast for how much water we can anticipate, and then it's also an observation of how much water we have seen past that site, and that's where we're going to focus on this image, and that's on the lower right side. It's that orangish brown kind of accumulation curve, and where that sits to the average, which is the horizontal green line there. We'll skip everything else. I just thought I'd briefly explain that. And the dotted orange line is the median accumulation of that total volume over the last 30-year period. So what you can see is that orange kind of volume grows above that dotted line, and it indicated that we've already seen about 109% of average complete volume come across this site in the upper Bear River, and then it translates downstream and is managed and such before, eventually, a lot of that water getting to the Great Salt Lake. So good news here, not only were we above normal in snowpack, but above normal in the efficiency of that runoff translating to volume of water in the upper Bear River. Now, I'll be able to move through the slides quicker here, looking at snow water equivalent for the Weber Basin, again, taking all the individual snow-tell sites for the Weber Basin, averaging it further south in latitude along the Wasatch Front. Our winters were even better. In this case, 134% of median snow water equivalent for the year. And that water supply volume, the total volume in thousands of acre feet of water for the Weber at Oakley is at 115% of average for this year. So again, another very good efficient runoff for the Weber. If we move south to the Provo, Utah Lake and Jordan regions, so we knew there was good news back in the first week of February, right? If we looked at Utah Lake reached compromised level on February 8th, where then pretty much all the water that was coming in was passing through Utah Lake, moving downstream through the Jordan and getting to the Great Salt Lake. So since February 8th and throughout the whole runoff season, water coming in was largely getting out here into the lake. 135% of median snow water equivalent for these basins. And now I'll show a few of these images, starting with the Provo woodland, which is upper headwater areas of the Provo River. About 120% of average for total volume water supply Provo woodland. If we look at Big Cottonwood Creek in the Six Creeks region of Salt Lake City, 118% of median. Little Cottonwood, same, 118% of median. So a lot of water, well above normal, not just snowpack, but the translation of that water in the snow to the actual volume of water making it to our creeks, rivers, and streams in these basins. As well, our holdover in our reservoir systems from our record-breaking last year going into the snowmelt runoff season this year, we hadn't seen such positive levels since 2011. And then again, we had an above normal winter, an above normal runoff. Not only were we able to fill our reservoir systems, this is data, they're called teacup diagrams from the Bureau of Reclamation, focusing on their reservoirs here along the Wasatch Front in northern Utah. Where you see that blue kind of filling up that teacup, that's the pool level of the reservoirs. If you see any white at the top of the teacup, which you don't see much at all in any of these, that's a percent lack in full pool. Basically, everywhere around the Wasatch Front currently sits above 90%, especially for our larger reservoirs, and they did top off and in fact have to go into flood control measures during the snowmelt runoff. So not only could they fill the reservoirs, but they were passing a lot of that water downstream. They were passing it to Utah Lake. Utah Lake was having to pass it through the Jordan. The water coming from Six Creek basins, from the Cottonwoods, again, largely passing out through the Jordan River and the Surplus Canal to the Great Salt Lake. So it's really great news to see how much water was being able to not just stored for our water supply and future use, because if we're not in drought, we need to be preparing for drought, right? But also an excess getting passed, which was great. And, thank weather and really thank back-to-back big years. Is it a savior? Does it fix everything? Absolutely not. Is it a gross improvement? Yes. So, and Ryan's here, and I always thank Ryan because I use a lot of his information as well from the USGS. So how did that translate, the weather creating the snowpack and then running through the runoff? How did that translate to the change in pool or lake elevations at the Great Salt Lake? We'll look at two different sites. The south arm, which is the Great Salt Lake surface elevation at Saltair Boat Harbor. Again, thank you for this information, Ryan. The seasonal peak occurred back in the first week of May, and we reached 4195.2 feet, which was, a net increase over our peak last year by roughly a foot. Currently, the latest daily value from the 8th of July is 4194.3. So we've dropped by almost a foot. That's normal for this time of year. We typically peak during snowmelt runoff. We enter the warm season. We start getting increased evaporation, et cetera. You can see that drop of nearly a foot. It's not all just due to evaporation, as we'll talk about in a moment, though. We move north to the Great Salt Lake surface elevation near Saline, Utah. Now we're north arm of the lake. Obviously, there have been some changes to the berm over the last couple of years to try to help mitigate some of the issues that were, encroaching on the south arm and the salinity of the Great Salt Lake there. Raised the berm level. This year, we were actually able to get the south arm above the berm level and pass a lot of flow into the north arm. In a lot of cases, and it still continues, I believe, in excess of 2,000 cubic feet per second, and up to 25 or 100 or so during runoff. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it was very significant. I still believe that we're right around that 2,000 mark. So passing a lot of that flow from the south arm, that's one of the reasons for that dip over the last 2 months, along with the evaporation. And one of the biggest drivers, what you see here, the seasonal peak occurred back in June 17th at 4192.3. And as of the 8th, just a couple days ago, sitting at 4192.1. So really only dropped by 0.2 feet. And again, that's a big reason that we're essentially reaching a balance of inflow, right? A lot of that coming from the south arm, and that evaporation kind of keeping it at a stable scenario for now anyways. So we talked about kind of what happened in the past, where we stand now. Weather is the driving factor, weather and climate. I'm going to focus on the near-term weather forecast, and then kind of the outlook over the next few months into next winter season, and go from there. So what I'm going to do really quickly is just, you've all heard about the heat wave, right? I'm calling it kind of stupid hot for us. It's that kind of elevated, where we're going to be translating over the next few days. And that is driven by high pressure. High pressure, you've probably heard of the heat dome. That's becoming the kind of media focus and terminology, with high pressure driving heat waves. And it essentially is just a stable atmosphere that creates a sinking motion, and sinking motion in the atmosphere creates more heat at the surface. We don't need to get into the details of that. But this image on the left, I'm going to step through the forecast over the next 7 days, 24 hours at a time. And the warm colors indicate those stable conditions associated with high pressure, stable, dry, and anomalously warm for those areas. Where you see the cool colors, those are associated with low pressure systems, typically more precipitation, etc., especially in the winter months. But as I step through this, focus on that kind of circle that's oriented over Nevada. That's the center of the high pressure. And going 24 hours in time, as we move into this weekend, you can see the high pressure sits overhead, orients overhead as we get into the weekend. We're now looking at Saturday afternoon, and then gradually shifts east as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. You can also see those warm colors start diminishing back to the white, which is more of a normal. Heat wave is going to peak through Saturday, and again, it's stupid hot. We're talking near record-breaking heat, 10% chance that Salt Lake City will reach its all-time high on record of 107. Right now, we're forecasting 105. The impacts of this heat and this high pressure, again, it translates to the impacts of water conditions on the Great Salt Lake in just the short term. And that's because this high pressure, there are no clouds, right? So much solar. The evaporative demand in weather conditions like this is at a much higher elevated level. So we're going to see more rapid short-term impacts over the next week due to this high pressure. But as this high pressure weakens, like we're looking at that image on the left right now, what happens this time of year typically that we start seeing the introduction of? That's the North American monsoon. Now, the North American monsoon focuses on more the Arizona, New Mexico region and portions of southern Utah. But in some years, like we've seen, even during our drought period years, that creeps up into northern Utah as well, and can bring us, a decent amount of precipitation. Certainly not what the winter brings, but we'd rather have cloud cover and periodic thunderstorms and rain than record-breaking heat and lack of cloud cover and increased evaporation. So there's some sign that we could see a transition towards that next week. The image on the right is the forecast of precipitation over the next 7 days, accumulative over those 7-day period. And you can see those blues down in northern Mexico indicating, that's where the monsoon is sitting over the next week in earnest, with over an inch of precipitation extending into southern Arizona and into the northern plateau of Arizona, and just barely creeping into southwestern Utah. So is it the start? I think it is the start of the driving circulation, but are we going to see much in the way of increased precipitation and cloud cover? Not too much over the next week, but we need it to start. because it's an engine that takes a long start and sometimes needs some starter fluid to get it going. Now we're looking at the next 7 days. How does that precipitation forecast compare to a normal 7-day period this time of year? And if you see greens on the image, that's an above normal precipitation forecast. If you see the yellows, the warmer colors, that's a below normal precipitation forecast. Essentially what we see here over northern Utah is near normal. And what near normal is extremely dry because we're in the driest period of our climatic year right now. Weather-wise, just wanted to show this to you all, the excessive heat warnings in the purple for pretty much all of western Utah, red flag warnings. These are current headlines that our office is putting out right now directly related to that heat wave. So what about moving forward in the future outlook period through the third week of July? What kind of trends can we anticipate, or changes to trends that we're experiencing now that could have an impact on things? And we're looking at data from the Climate Prediction Center here. They're taking all sorts of climate models and coming up with kind of the most realistic solution of an outcome. And in our case, in northern Utah, including the Great Salt Lake region, you can see a very dark shading of red, which is a very high probability outcome for maintaining above normal temperatures with high pressure. Not focused overhead, more focused on northern Rocky regions, but staying hot. If we look at the precipitation outlook, that first shade of green, it's a slight tilt to the seesaw, that the most likely outcome out of either above, below, or normal precipitation is slightly weighted more towards an above normal precipitation scenario for largely eastern Utah and southern Utah, associated with, kind of turning that key a little bit more on the monsoon and getting that more active. However, if we look at the outlook for July, August, and September, not great news, either precipitation on the right or temperature on the left. So the Climate Prediction Center only puts these 3-month average outlooks. It doesn't talk about anything in between. The roller coaster of weather changes. It's just saying, on average, over the next 3 months, what can we anticipate the outcomes to be, or the highest probability outcomes, and therefore high probability of maintaining above normal temperatures and a pretty decent probability for below normal precipitation, and a monsoon that is slightly delayed, which it has been, and slightly suppressed, which it has been as well. So we'll take what we can get out of it. I would expect to see in their next update in a few weeks, probabilities of below normal precipitation dropping a little bit. That's my that's what I see, but certainly don't see an extremely robust monsoon season, especially here in northern Utah. So getting into the larger scale, kind of global, the El Nino, La Nina, won't get into the details of those other than, there are variations in sea surface temperatures in the equatorial Pacific that drive large-scale weather patterns and can have impacts on different areas across not just the U.S., but globally. Last year, we were at an El Nino, it was above normal winter. The 3 previous years, we were in La Nina, and we had 2 well below normal and 1 record-breaking winter. What I will tell the group is La Nina, El Nino, it can go any which way in Utah. The forecast moving forward into next winter season is back to a La Nina scenario. And even though any one outcome can occur during La Nina, these are the typical impacts on the large-scale weather pattern shifts during La Nina periods, where the jet stream really shifts further north over the eastern Pacific, brings in cooler air to the Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies region, and couples that with a cooler and wetter, kind of moist southern branch of the jet stream, typically producing above normal precipitation for Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies region, and below normal precipitation for desert Southwest. Utah's right in the middle. Depending on where that northern branch storm track sets up, like it did last year, we got walled, right? 2 years previous, we were shut out. So it's variable, but once it sets up, it typically kind of wants to stay where it's at. So we'll see the outcome of that. But the reason why I'm showing this to you today is I look back at all the La Nina years in the period of record that I could, specifically looking at SNOTEL data and snow water equivalent. And more often than not, the northern Utah SNOTELs, again, more often than not, have seen either near or above normal snow water equivalent, which if we get that next year would be the third year in a row. And that really hasn't happened since the mid-90s. So keep your fingers crossed. We're in great shape right now for the short term. That's what I have for you today. Feel free to contact me if you'd like. Pleasure being here. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions now or later.
Thanks for that presentation, Glenn. That was great. And time for maybe just some quick questions. Any quick questions from either council members or liaisons down the table or online? How about from the public? Anybody burning question? Looks like cover the bases. Thanks, Glenn, and appreciate your contact information there at the end too. So thanks so much. Okay, the next agenda item, Joanna Endter-Wada from Utah State. Joanna, you're here. And Kelly, is it? Yeah, Kelly, welcome. So Joanna Endter-Wada and Kelly Kopp, Utah State, here to give us an update on the growing Water Smart program. So we'll turn the time over to you. Thanks for being here. Joanna, can we get you to use that mic? Just, I think people in the room can hear you, but I'm not sure about online. Is that mic on? Doesn't seem to be on.
Okay, there it is. The Growing Water Smart program is looking at growth in communities and how to manage that, integrating land and water planning for water smart growth. And so we're going to tell you about the workshops that we've had. 3 of the 4 have been in northern Utah. And I can tell you that the Great Salt Lake has been a motivating factor for growing water smart. And the reason that communities are also focusing on more cooperative and coordinated action. So we have learned through doing this program that the land use is driving the water use. And so it's extremely important to start integrating those 2 areas of planning. So Kelly and I are happy to be here today. We are leading the effort to implement Growing Water Smart in Utah. It's a program that was initiated by the Sonoran Institute and the Babbitt Center for Land and Water Policy, which is a center of the Lincoln Land Institute. It's been going on in Colorado, Arizona, California, and in the border states. And we've been implementing it here in Utah. So Kelly and I are taking the lead on implementing it here. It is designed and implemented with sensitivity to context in each place where it's implemented. We're part of a team, so when I say we're leading the effort, there's a lot of involvement of the Division of Water Resources, people from the Babbitt Institute, Western Resource Advocates. 2 of our workshops have been in connection with conservancy districts, and then we've also worked with the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman. So let me just tell you a little bit about the program objectives. So as you may recall, and since you've talked about other legislation today, this was a state level support for Growing Water Smart. This is unique. In the other states, it has been primarily handled within the nonprofit sector. So the support in the state of Utah has been much appreciated. It was a priority of Governor Cox in putting forward integrated land and water planning. It received legislative support and funding, and then the program was handed over for implementation by the Division of Water Resources, and we work with the division on implementing the program. And so on their website, you can read more about this whole effort to advance the integration of land and water planning. And some of the things that they're taking the lead on is in the SB 110 and getting communities to integrate a water component into their general plan. And so that's part of what we work with communities on. The trajectory here in northern Utah is just as we look at continued rapid growth and land use transitions, in particular, these decision points on land use transitions, it's really important in the Great Salt Lake that we look at how we grow water smart because of the effects that the growth will have on the situation that's already dire with the decline of the Great Salt Lake over the longer term. So what does growing water smart mean? And this is what we present to the communities. It's really looking at reducing the demand for water in communities by making new development as efficient as possible and retrofitting older inefficient development. So the two-pronged approach in urban communities. It's shifting to finding new water supplies from water conservation, reuse, recycling, rainwater harvesting. It's also, in addition to water provisioning within communities, trying to get communities to look at the broader landscape and how they do landscape planning and protect sensitive water areas, aquifer recharge areas, wetlands, rivering areas, and certainly our lakes. So it's attempting to protect those various elements of the landscape. And it's really attempting to bring greater resiliency into the system to address this growing uncertainty about risks that we're facing from water flood growth, pandemics, and other things. So it has a broad focus for communities. One of the visions is it holds out trying to create a vibrant water future. And so the focus is really on shifting from supply to demand management approaches. There are a lot of tools that we bring to bear in the workshops, planning tools and how you get adequate and sustainable water supply standards, water smart land use policy, healthy and resilient watersheds, keeping that broader perspective of the watersheds in mind, and how we promote efficient water demand programs. So it's based on cross-sector collaboration, bringing together land use planners, water managers, local officials, and local staff to develop plans for the future and develop water smart strategies that they will pursue. The outcomes, of course, are then to help reduce water demand and ensure that these approaches support community values, to build resilience to natural hazards, protect and enhance ecosystem services. That's stress, and that's really important. Oftentimes they don't think about that at a local planning level, and in all of it to enhance community well-being. So let me tell you about some of the Growing Water Smart activities that we do. You can read about this. We have this on the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping website. But the Growing Water Smarts creates resources and conducts workshops with communities for this integrated land and water planning and decision making. And so the program activities include bringing community teams together, generally of 6 to 10 land use planners and water managers and staff. They participate in pre-workshop phone calls. They apply to be in the program. They get accepted. They do a self-assessment. They review curriculum before coming to a 3-day workshop. Then they attend a 3-day retreat-style workshop, and they develop a 12-month action plan out of these workshops. And then they also participate in post-workshop team action plan meetings and implementation activities. So it's a long-term process. And we really want to give a lot of credit to people who commit their time, these local communities, to working together on these plans. Small communities, people often know each other within the city, but in larger communities, getting land use planning departments and water planning together is not an easy feat sometimes. So the workshops are designed to help communities in this process. The end goal is they walk away with a 3-month, 6-month, 12-month action plan to create a water smart community. All of their team discussions are facilitated. The workshops consist of some presentations, some peer-to-peer networking between the teams that are there, and then a lot of focus, the majority, on their facilitation within their team as they talk through a process with their facilitators. So we've had 4 workshops to date in November 22, and you can see the communities listed here. I'm showing you these images from the website because you can go and download the workshop agenda and the workbook, the workshop guidebooks. We've created different guidebooks for each of the 4 different workshops, and Kelly's going to talk just a little bit more about this. We did a January Southwest Utah, and then we did one with Weber Basin Water Conservancy District in May. So the second workshop was in June up at Utah State University. You can see Northern Utah communities and counties represented here. Southwestern Utah we did in January, and then Weber Basin was just this past May. In all, we've had 25 communities, counties, and cities, and then the counties themselves have representatives from many cities within them. So it's a growing effort. The state has, in this past legislative session, allocated more money to continue the program.
Thank you, Joanna. I'm going to just take a little bit of time to share with you some of the resources that we have developed in support of the Growing Water Smart program. As Joanna said, we're leading that effort here in Utah, in particular with curriculum development. So it is largely a workshop-based program, and that is hugely important to the success of the program. But I would say that equally as important are the resources that we've developed, which are continually updated. And Joanna showed you 2 of the workbooks that we have written in support of the program, of 4 that are revised and updated with each new workshop. So we do have these guidebooks associated with the workshop. And as I mentioned, they're updated with each workshop to include the latest legislation in the state, as well as an ongoing library of case studies that we have developed in support of the program that are Utah-based. So as Joanna mentioned, the program exists in other states in the Desert Southwest, but they each have their own curriculum, they each have their own guidebooks, they each have their own case studies. So in actually 2021, when we began this process, we were starting from absolute scratch in developing these resources for Utah. So the guidebook does include 4 sections, the first of which is planning and goal setting, water smart, the second of which is water smart land use and development policies. We then have a section on watershed resilience and water smart infrastructure. And lastly, a section on water conservation and efficiency tools. So in section 1, which is focused on planning and goal setting, this is a section where we detail information on general plans, water conservation plans, stormwater management plans, hazard mitigation and recovery, and things of that nature. And we also include case studies, as I mentioned. In this case, we have a case study from Ivan City. As Joanna mentioned, we were in Southwest Utah in January. We had every member agency of the Washington County Water Conservancy District participating. And Ivan City participated with us. They are the city that I actually facilitated in that workshop, and they've been an absolute pleasure to work with through the entire process. But in this case, we have a case study on how they engage their populace on this issue. And they have quote unquote talkabouts in their city, which they hold quarterly, and they address topics of concern to the community very, very successfully. And so that's something, an example that we can share with other communities who participate in this program. Section 2, where we're talking about water smart land use and development policies and how integrating land and water can be helpful for long-term planning strategies. This is a section in which we also talk about low-impact development, for example, as well as many other approaches. And in this case, again, this is from the January workshop in Southwest Utah. We had a case study on the water efficiency ordinances and standards that the water district developed in this case, and that have since been adopted by every single member agency. So this is not typical in the state, but this has been very, very effective in Southwest Utah, and again, can serve as an example to communities who participate in the program later on. Here's another case study that is part of that section in which we discuss a cooperative effort between Utah State University, our Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, and the state's Department of Facilities and Construction Management. They had been tasked by the governor through executive order with reducing outdoor irrigation on all DFCM properties throughout the state. And so we worked very closely with them on ways to do that, setting up appropriate irrigation schedules and different approaches to water conservation and management in those landscapes. The third section focused on watershed resilience as well as water smart infrastructure. This is where we talk about things like green infrastructure approaches, as well as the maintenance of water quality in our watersheds, among other things. One case study that we have as part of this section is with the Central Iron County Water Conservancy District. They have a rather innovative program, I would call it, for aquifer recharge, which in the Cedar Valley is becoming critically important. They were withdrawing more than was recharging, and so they have taken some very aggressive and creative approaches in their community to recharging their aquifers and creating a more stable water situation there. Another case study here talks about the very first pilot effort in the state to allow gray water use in residential situations. This is a pilot project that was actually implemented by another colleague at USU. Her name is Roz McCann, and she is the Extension Sustainability Specialist at Utah State. She used her own home as a pilot in this effort and created a model by which other health districts and health departments in the state can support and allow gray water infrastructure on a residential scale to reduce use of water resources. So that has also been a case study that we've highlighted. The last section in the guidebooks that we provide to participants in the workshop focuses on water conservation and efficiency tools. These can be very specific tools that might have come from our work with the Center for Water Efficient Landscaping, as well as others. For example, Joanna did a great deal of work with Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, looking at how effective secondary metering could be. And I think we're all very well aware of how that has ended up in the state, where we are now metering every bit of water, or at least getting there, so that we have a better handle on supplies as well as demand. And we also highlight things like demonstration gardens in the state, of which there are now many. And I think that's, for me, that's very gratifying. When I first moved to Utah 25 years ago, there was one beginning, I would say. And we now have several across the state in several different regions that allow folks to see and observe different approaches to landscaping so that they can reduce outdoor water use. I would say then, probably to me, the most important section of the guidebook, this is the last section in the guidebook, is a section of additional resources, which if you look on the web-based version of these guidebooks, there are many, many, many hot links to get you to different resources that are included in this section, as well as throughout the other sections. For example, information on water supply and demand, planning and development, information from the state, and of course, the Division of Water Resources is a very close partner in this program. We also include regional information, water plans and reports, general plan information for sustainability, additional resources for integrating land use and planning, and then resources for specific types of water planning, including public works. And then on the water conservation side, we discuss many, many different types of conservation programs, as well as grants and rebates, several of which are available through the state. We focus a bit on landscape water conservation because, of course, in the urban sector, that is a very large focus. Water efficient plant lists, demonstration gardens, landscape water efficiency standards, as well as tools for quantifying water conservation are also included as well as climate resources. So in addition to the guidebook and the curriculum support we provide through the program, of course, the workshop that communities participate in is a huge part of the program. And that workshop uses a web-based, what we call HQ or headquarters, to archive and gather all of the information for the participating communities. So what you see here is that landing page to the HQ. This is where communities who participate can gather information about the other communities who are participating. They have contact information for other communities, folks they might want to reach out to again. This is also where, as facilitators, we archive all of the notes and information that we gathered during the workshop process. So a huge part of this workshop process is that these communities develop an action plan, and it is time-based. They have items that they must, we hope they will achieve in 6 months, in 12 months, etc. And that is what they leave the workshop with. And it takes us 2.5 days to get there, but we do get there. And this is where that information is archived. I do just want to share some of the information that we've received from participating communities. Of course, you know, we're always working on evaluation and making this as effective as it can be. They seem to really, truly appreciate the teamwork sessions where they gather as a group, a community, city officials, planners, etc., and work together on those action plans. They really also focus on and appreciate the retreat style of the approaches, which is how we operate these workshops. We like to get folks away from home base, so they're not very tempted to hop out to a quick meeting or a phone call, whatever the case may be. It is critically important that they are totally focused on the tasks at hand, and that then becomes very effective in terms of action planning. They learn how other cities and communities are approaching integrating water and land use planning. And they just appreciate the facilitation aspect as well. Because after you facilitate a few of these workshops, you get a pretty good idea of how to enhance the conversation, bring resources that they're asking for, and help them to be successful in their action planning. We've had all kinds of positive feedback from the program, very helpful, enlightening, constructive, great program. And I'd say importantly, we also do follow-up with these communities. Now that's taken different forms as the program has evolved since 2021. But most recently, we followed up with the communities in Southwest Utah. We were there 2 weeks ago. It was 114 degrees and not the most pleasant climate, but we had fantastic follow-up meetings with every community who has participated in the workshop. And there was some accountability there. So we showed up and asked them, where are you in your action plan? But not only that, it's also about resource provision. Where are you in your action plan? In almost every case, they were right on track and doing great. But then how else can we, Utah State, the Division of Water Resources, and the Water Conservancy districts support you in your efforts? So we are learning as we go. That has been incredibly effective, that follow-up, and we will continue to do that along with other evaluation activities. So that is the Utah Growing Water Smart program. It's been a real joy and privilege to work on, and we thank you for your attention, and I don't know if we have time for questions.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Joanna. Maybe for anybody got a quick question from the council members or the public? Can I just ask maybe quick, it sounds like great resource, great process. I really love the follow-up. Any effort to quantify sort of connecting the dots where, by that I mean, somebody attends a workshop and then consistent with the plan they develop, they actually are implementing, where you can sort of connect the dots and say, boy, all of this actions came out of this effort. Any effort to quantify that yet?
Yes. I'll give you a specific example. I mentioned that I worked with Ivan City in the January workshop. And they are, by the way, in my experience with this program, the most aggressive community in the state right now in terms of trying to integrate land and water planning and working on water conservation. So to answer your question, one of the things that came up during the workshop for them was they wanted to go so much further beyond typical landscape water efficiency measures in their city code than they had seen in the state, but they weren't sure what to do or how to do that or what they should focus on. So I happen to work in that area. I work a lot on irrigation efficiency, plant water use efficiency, et cetera. And so since January, I've been working with them on developing that code. And we did develop that code. I worked in cooperation with their landscape and parks folks. That has now gone to city council where it is going to be adopted. So that's one example.
That's great. Thanks, Kelly.
Sure.
Thanks, Joanna. Appreciate it. Great work. Okay, we're wrapping up here, folks. This is normally about the time that we adjourn or try to adjourn. We leave a little bit of time that's flexible, but we want to do two things. One is we always have opportunity for public comment, so we want to open it up for public comment. Then after that, we'll kind of go to the council really to talk about sort of future agenda items or any burning issues that they may have. So I wanted to open it up for public comment right now, and if anybody would like to make a public comment. Okay, let's go up here first, and then we'll catch you in the back.
I just wanted to thank everyone who participated in the Great Salt Lake Issues Forum last May. Your sponsorship, your participation on panels and presentations was remarkable. The program is available, a video archive on our website, fogsl.org, so you can see the presentations, you can read about the presenters, and we'll look forward to doing it again in 2026. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. It was a great forum. I think everybody hopefully had the chance to attend. Brian?
Dwight Slaw, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and we were a little tight to get on the agenda this month, so we've already talked to Marissa about future agenda, future meetings. So Reclamation and USGS executed an interagency agreement last week for some monitoring activities on the Great Salt Lake Basin. And this was just over $3 million of funding that's separate from the basin study funding program, and it's part of the integrated plan with the state of Utah and our partners there. And I'll leave it to, and this is a 5-year agreement. It expires June 30th of 2029. So it just executed last week. I'll let Ryan list the details of the tasks we're actually.
Okay, thank you very much, Dwight, and thank you for our ongoing partnership with the Bureau of Reclamation. So just to give you a quick overview of this $3 million investment in the Great Salt Lake Basin. The tasks are going to include installation of 13 new stream gauges, 9 of which are going to be focused on helping to improve inflow estimates to the south arm of Great Salt Lake, very significant. There's going to be additional investment at Bear River outflow monitoring at the Bear River Bay area. There's already investment by USGS and our state cooperators on some monitoring there. The Bureau of Reclamation is going to chip in funds to help us basically improve quantification of Bear River inflow directly into the south arm of Great Salt Lake. It also includes funds for a Great Salt Lake Hydromapper website enhancement. Hopefully you're all very familiar with that website. The enhancement is going to be an addition of an interactive lake surface area and volume calculator and corresponding map. The funding will help us produce Great Salt Lake water and salt balance reports. The goal is to start that in 2027. This is something USGS has done historically, but kind of it was dropped around 2002, 2003, and so we're going to pick back up on that activity going forward. There's going to be funds to help create a numerical model of Bear River outflows from the Bear River Bay area. So this is going to be on top of the pilot stream gauging effort we're going to make at that location. So we'll have modeling, we'll have empirical data combined to help quantify Bear River inflows to the south arm. And then finally, we're going to be involved with Great Salt Lake evaporation work that's being led by the state of Utah. We're going to install some water temperature profile buoys, and which is going to be an addition to the work, the evaporation work being led by the state of Utah. So we're very, very excited about this investment. Thank you. David O'Leary has one more public comment.
Tim. Hi, David O'Leary, USGS Utah Water Science Center. I just wanted to take a quick second. The director of the U.S. Geological Survey, Director Applegate, was out here last month for a Association of State Geologists, and we did a little visit at Great Salt Lake, and I just want to thank Tim and other state colleagues. We had folks from the state, from academia, from industry met out there. And I think it was a really good showcase of all the great collaboration that's ongoing surrounding Great Salt Lake. So I just want to again thank the folks that both online and that are here that were able to participate in that.
Thanks. Hey.
Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention earlier, and that is that Tim and I have had an amazing kind of a stacking race. You know, as you've heard of arms races and space races, but in our offices, we have a race to see who can stack files the highest. And I'm not sure who's winning, but one of the benefits of this is sometimes you find artifacts, and I promised him that I would give him a complete set of the Great Salt Lake annual reports from the very beginning. And early on, actually, a generous donor, there was no budget for the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council. So TNC was kind of the budget, thanks to some private contributors. So Tim, here's your complete set of archival annual reports.
Thank you, Dave. I will make sure it gets stacked in an appropriate location. No, I really do appreciate that. Any other comments from in the room or online? Anybody online? Public comment. Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and close the public comments. Thanks for all those. Were great. And then back to the council and liaisons. And the questions, we don't really have any action items for today teed up, but would very much anything sort of on your mind, things that you'd like to hear, future meeting. Leland, I know you've got one, and but you thinking other people. Okay.
Yeah, we've just completed with SWCA a toolkit that we're going to have a presentation on at September meeting. However, we should be considering with this toolkit, and perhaps we could get that sent out to the council so they can all review it well in advance of that meeting. We should be considering a means of getting this out to a greater population, primarily aimed at municipalities. The toolkit is to help municipalities come up with water conserving programs and ordinances that achieve the needed conservation to live within existing water supplies, so there's no new development required in order to support population growth. And so we ought to be considering in the money we have going forward for this year, putting some of that money aside to do a blitz, if you will, of putting this information out to the municipalities in the Great Salt Lake Basin.
Kim, I have a question about that. Is it
Yeah, go
possible
ahead, Tina.
for GSLAC to either support a session at the Utah League of Cities and Towns to present that toolkit, or is it something that Craig Call can incorporate into his Urban Land Use Institute trainings that he's doing around the state? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. This would also seem to dovetail quite nicely with what Joanna and Kelly are doing, to the extent it augments really some outreach that they're already doing and engaged in. So that's something we should think about as well. Just to be clear for context, so, and this was a change made, I think, about 2017. So, well, GSLAC still doesn't have a regular budget. We're supported by Forestry, Fire, and State Lands and the Department of Natural Resources. We do, GSLAC does have the ability to direct. It's $125,000 a year. It comes out of the brine shrimp royalty, so the royalty that the brine shrimp industry pays to the state. GSLAC is able to direct that. We've used it for reports, for outreach, for a variety of things, some of which have really helped shape public debates on Great Salt Lake, have had some real high value. So just for context, so Leland's proposals, we consider thinking about allocating some of the funds out of the 125 for this fiscal year, specifically to this toolkit and outreach associated with the toolkit.
So the toolkit, it will be completed though, right, Leland? It's been worked on? Yeah. So Salt Lake County, we would like to work in cooperation with GSLAC to support something, to sponsor something at the League of Cities and Towns. We normally provide support for those conferences from Salt Lake County to the League, and it would be great. I'd love to be able to reach out to Cameron Deal and just see if they'd be willing to, create a slot if you and the SCWA folks would be willing to put kind of a session outline together for them for proposal, if that would be acceptable.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
report said very soon, right?
Yeah.
Marissa?
And the county also supports the Utah Land Use Institute, Craig Call's group, who was paid by the state to do all the required planning commission training. Each planning commission's training is required by state. And so that's another thing. So if we have a moment to chat, maybe after today's meeting or in the week next week, Marissa, to see if we can't facilitate that, we'd be happy to support that effort.
Okay.
Excellent. And thanks, Tina. I think that's a great suggestion. It's interesting to me too. Sometimes cities are just out there, but they're always curious what other cities are doing. And when other cities are doing that, you want to be kind of with cool kids. You want to be doing stuff too. So I see some real opportunity there.
Well, the county has land use authority only over about 11,000 people in the county of Salt Lake. So really the role we play is to provide support to those organizations that support the 23 municipalities within Salt Lake County. But if we could do it at one of their national conferences or their state conference, then we obviously will be able to leverage that support much further.
Well, Dina, if you wouldn't mind taking the laboring or just that initial outreach to the league to just sort of test the waters and see if they'd be open to something like that, I'm sure we can work something out. Other items that you're interested in, like to see on a future agenda from liaisons or members of the council? Anything burning? If not, you know where to find us. But Tom?
I'm intrigued to see the outcome from the commissioner's report and the sort of gaps that they see and how, what role we can play. In the past, we've had, as you mentioned, a role of providing information, and so that on a regular basis, we sit down and say, where should we focus? I'm trying to remember what time of year we do that, but as we head into ends of budgets and legislative sessions, might be a good time to try to align our efforts.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
I echo what Tom said. I think that September meeting in the past, we've had kind of a preview of what to expect at the legislative session, and we've never had the benefit of the commission report. So I think I agree with you. I think it would be really helpful to see where the gaps are or where the lines of inquiry are going with that information, and just see how we can either support research at this level or the other watershed councils to sort of support the work that they're doing as well.
Thanks, Dina. If y'all can predict 6 months out what the legislature's going to do, mad respect. No, that's all good suggestions. Any others? Okay, if not, we'll call it there, but be thinking about that, and do let me or Marissa know if you've got ideas, suggestions, things you'd like us to take a look at, because we'll be building those agendas. Just a reminder, the meeting will be on September 11th here from 10 to roughly 11:30 to noon, sometime in that window. We also have a meeting scheduled for November 13th, and I think on that one, we may try to go to Antelope Island. I don't know, we'll see. We'll check. Plan on here, but we try to do one meeting a year out at Antelope Island. They're doing some exciting stuff out there that are going to make it easier to meet out there too. So that'll be fun. All right, with that, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Thank you for your participation, and we'll entertain a final motion. Members of the council. Motion to adjourn. Dina, second. Leland, all in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. Everybody stay cool out there. Pray for rain.